Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming today on a weekday evening. And I'm grateful to be here today. And we will be discussing on the topic of relationships based on the Ramayana. And during this overall visit, I'm going to talk about the theme of relationships centered on brothers in Ramayana. Now there are three sets of brothers, 4, 3, 2. Who are these 4, 3, 2? Who are the four brothers? Yes, so Ram, Lakshman, four brothers. Who are the three brothers? Yes, so Ravan, Kumbhakarna, and Vibhishana. And then who are the two brothers? Yes, Wali and Sugri. So I'll be discussing these four brothers in the next three sessions that we will have over here. And then in Dubai, I'll be talking about in the main Sunday class, I'll be talking about Wali Sugri. And then subsequent classes, I'll be talking about Ravan, Kumbhakarna, and Vibhishana. And we will be going over not the entire story, but some significant incidents and what can be understood from those incidents. So, generally, say, let's focus on the basic level of interaction. While there are four brothers in the Ramayana, there are two units. Who are the two units? Yes, Ram, Lakshman are one unit, Bharat, Shatrugna are another unit. And they united all four, but they're especially close to each other, these two. So generally, it's very easy to be pleasant and kind and helpful when everything is going right. So generally speaking, when we talk about relationships, now in relationships, conflicts can come from broadly two sets of factors. One is internal and the other is external. So internal means that the two people themselves cannot get along with each other. And external, so if you're having two people, internal conflict means when they interact with each other, there are some issues that come up. So sometimes two different sets of values, and so are just different personalities. One person is very introvert, the other person is very extrovert. One person is very fixed, kind of do things. The other person is more thoughtful, analytical, contemplative. One person is very rational, the other person is very emotional. So conflicts can arise because of factors that are internal to both of them. And sometimes conflicts can arise because of external factors. I mean, they don't have any problem among themselves, but sometimes conflicts can come from extraneous factors. And the extraneous factors, the factors outside the relationship, can be twofold. One can be situations, and the other can be people. What do you mean by situations and people? That sometimes certain situations come in life where there is a certain misunderstanding that happens. And because of that misunderstanding, things start going downwards. So this is what happened with respect to, say, Wali and Sugriv. When Wali thought that Sugriv had deliberately trapped him in the cave so that he could take the kingdom. So sometimes the situations come up and those situations lead to misunderstandings. And sometimes there are people who deliberately try to manipulate and create a wedge or a break in the relationship. Now sometimes they may do it out of good intention or they may have evil intentions. So, for example, now what Manthara did to Kaikeyi, and then what Kaikeyi did to the entire kingdom. And because of that, Ram had to go away from the kingdom. And that created a wedge between Ram and Bharat. Now, of course, that wedge did not last. But the point is, sometimes somebody from outside can manipulate an insight, and that can create problems. So, we will be focusing in the series on the four brothers who are themselves virtuous on the extrinsic factors. See, when two people are virtuous means that both of them recognize the importance of certain higher values and purposes in life. Then, even if there are differences, they can manage their differences because there is a higher purpose involved. It's not easy, and sometimes there is a lot of difference between two people, it becomes difficult. But one aspect of virtue itself, when we say virtue, goodness, kindness, helpfulness, the characteristic of virtue is basically to keep our intention above our emotion, or to keep principle or purpose above pleasure. This is a greater than sign. It is not a V sign. So, the idea is that yes, we may have our differences, but we have a higher purpose. And that because of that purpose, we will manage our differences. So, that is one characteristic of virtue. And Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says in 12:15 that Yasman no dvijate loko, loka no dvijate chayah, harsha marsha bhayo dvegair, mukto yah sachame priyah. So he says that those kind of devotees are dear to me who, it's interesting, what does he say over here? Normally what happens is, when two people are in a relationship, what happens is I disturb you and then you disturb me, and together we create a disturbed world. A disturbed family, a disturbed community, and a disturbed world. Now that is just the way unfortunately things are, and this is all the more so in Kali Yuga, which is the age of Kalaha. But what Krishna says is, if we don't disturb others, and if we are not disturbed by others, then such a devotee, yomad bhaktaha same priyaha. Now, how is it possible that we don't get disturbed by others and we don't disturb others? That is not easy. But that happens when we have something bigger that is common. We'll talk about this theme as we move forward. But the idea is disturbances will always be there in life. But when we have a shared purpose, a shared value, then those disturbances don't seem that big. Generally, if we don't have anything to fight for, that means something is not so important in our life that we are ready to fight for it. If we don't have anything to fight for, that won't make us peaceful. If we don't have anything to fight for, then we will fight for anything. What will happen is, any small issue will become big. Oh, you didn't listen to me. Why did you speak like this to me? What are you doing over here? So, but when we have something to fight for, this is important for us. Then what happens is, if we agree on that thing, then all other smaller issues we can manage. So we don't have anything to fight for. That means we don't have anything so important for us. When I say anything to fight for, that doesn't mean that we're just looking for something to fight for. Rather, what it means is that something is so important that if it is required, I will fight for it. If we don't have anything to fight for, then we will fight for anything. Something or other will come up in our mind and we will start fighting. One of my friends is in the Indian Army, and he's telling me how generally what happens is an army is a place where people have to be away from their families and stay together, sometimes very austere conditions. And it's very easy to, in one sense, start having irritations, and the irritations can go to conflicts, and sometimes everybody is in a state of nerves, and then the tempers get frayed, and people have weapons. It can become deadly, but it doesn't happen very frequently. Generally, it doesn't happen very frequently, especially when they are on the borders and there is the threat of the enemy. So if there is no threat of the enemy, then there is nothing uniting them to fight for. And then what happens is, any small thing, we start fighting for that. So when we say we don't have anything to fight for. What that means is, okay, I trust that you are also fighting for this. So if two soldiers may have many differences of opinion, but if both of them agree that we are fighting for our country, and both of them trust each other's dedication to the country, then that will ensure that their fights among themselves won't become too big. So we'll come to this theme that virtue means that we have something to fight for. We have something to fight for. And vice means we fight for anything. Vice means we end up fighting for any small thing. So now in the Ramayana, the way the story emerges is that Ram, Lakshman, Bharat, Shatrugna, they grow up together. Not just brothers, but the best of friends. And Ayodhya is a prosperous kingdom. Okay. So they are living in Ayodhya and they are growing up, and Dasharatha Maharaj is delighted to see how, not just how virtuous they are, but how much they get along with each other. And as they are growing up, it happens that the thoughts of succession start crossing his mind. That now I should hand my kingdom over. And generally speaking, these points of transition, the points of transition can very easily become the points of turbulence. Because change is uncomfortable. Change can be unpredictable. Of course, you can say life in general is unpredictable. But there is a certain level of predictability in our lives. See, all of you are sitting here and hearing this talk. Now, all of you are perfectly confident, okay? All of you are perfectly confident that the person sitting next to you is not suddenly going to turn at you and slap you in the face. Now, we will say anything is possible. But if somebody has come for a spiritual talk like this, they have that level of seriousness, that they have that level of self-control, they have that level of culture that they won't do this. So generally, we need a certain level of predictability in our life, a certain level of structure in our life, so that we can focus on something bigger. But change, we don't know what is going to happen. Say, if we are together for a family function and one of the family members brings a complete stranger, and I say, okay, how will this person behave? How am I supposed to behave in the presence of this person? So that creates some discomfort. So now, when the succession is to happen, so the theme which I'll talk about is that how sometimes good intentions can lead to terrible results. That sometimes we say good intentions are very important. Yes, they are important, no doubt. But ultimately, if our good intentions they blind us to everything else, then that can become a problem. So when Ram is chosen to be the king, at that time Bharat is not in the kingdom. But Bharat has no objection to it, as we will learn later. It is naturally to be expected that Ram, being the eldest, would become the king. So, at this particular time, Kaikai becomes concerned. And generally, what happens is that we often divide the world into good people and bad people. And there are good people who generally do good things, and there are bad people who do bad things. But sometimes it happens that good people do bad things. And sometimes it happens that bad people do good things. And then it can become very confusing. So, when a good person does something bad, what happens? What is their thinking? Okay, is there something wrong over here? Or? Can you hear me without this? Okay. Okay. So I'll continue till then. So when a good person does bad things, what goes on in their mind? Is it that they were bad all the time and they were concealing it till now? And now they got the opportunity, so they start exposing how bad they are? Or is it that they were slowly becoming corrupted and we never noticed? Or is it just a one-off incident that somehow happened? And that should be overlooked. So broadly, when good people do bad things, there are these three possibilities. That it is just a one-off thing. All of us can sometimes be put in difficult situations. And sometimes bad situations can bring the bad even out of good people. Suppose we have had a very hard, long day at work, and then we come back home. And normally we are very even-tempered, but suddenly somebody asks us something, and we snap. Now, does that mean that we are a short-tempered person? It may, but it need not also. Isn't it? So, it could be that when a good person does something bad, now of course, just yelling at someone may not be a very bad thing, but we're just taking that as an example over here. So, is it that it is a one-off bad action and should be overlooked? Or is it that there was a gradual, invisible corruption of that person? That means the person was becoming degraded. The person was good, but the person slowly becoming bad and we didn't realize it. And suddenly it happened. Or was it was concealed all along? That a person simply pretended to be good, waiting for an opportunity. So broadly, there are these three possibilities. And it is important for us to understand when somebody does something bad, how should we, when somebody we consider normally to be good, does something bad, how do we continue that relationship? How do we deal with that person? So, understanding what the person was thinking while they did that bad thing. Even if we agree that there's no minimizing that what they did was bad, but what they were thinking becomes very important. So now, between Ram and Bharat, this huge storm is going to come in their relationship. And that comes when Bharat is absent. And somehow Kaikai, by the instigation of Manthara, starts thinking that there is a conspiracy over here. That there is a conspiracy to rob the kingdom from my son and give it to Kaushalya's son. Now, interestingly, in her thinking, she doesn't think of Ram. She has no animosity toward Ram particularly. But there is a natural tension and competition between co-wives. And she has been in a privileged position as the favorite queen. She was the youngest and the favorite. And Kaushalya was the eldest. She was expected to have the most respect, but the king did not pay her that much attention. And that's why her position had become a little lower. So now, for her, there was that tension between her and Kaushalya. Now, that was never like a outright bitterness. It was just some tension that was there below the surface. But at this particular point, she started seeing this was a conspiracy. Somehow, Kaushalya has influenced Dashrath, and that's why he is now having Ram made as the king. And she felt that Bharat should be the king. And if Bharat is not the king, then what will happen to Bharat? We say nothing will happen to Bharat. He will be the brother of the king. He will still live in prosperity. He will still have lot of royal influence. But no. Sometimes emotions, especially when we love someone. Now, love can at one level be empowering. When we love someone and that person is in trouble, we can go to great efforts to try to help that person. Sometimes there are some honest stories of superhuman strength where somebody's child is, a vehicle has fallen on that child and they lift up the whole vehicle. So now normally they don't have that much power, but that time they just get that strength. So love at one level can be empowering. But at another level, love can also be blinding. Now in one sense you can say empowerment is also a form of blindness. Isn't it? When we say somebody is empowered, that means they don't see how big the obstacle is. And they just push on, I have to do this. So now in her case, her love for Bharat blinds her. And she starts thinking that if Bharat is not the king, then he will be sidelined. He will be threatened. He may even be eliminated or executed. So these are the kinds of fears that Manthara plants in her. She initially says, no, Ram may become the king now, but after him, Bharat may become the king. What is the big deal? It's all in the same family. But Kaikai says, you foolish woman, you do not understand the ways of kings. Once Ram becomes the king, the throne will permanently pass on to his side. And from there, it will go to his son. And Bharat will never get anything at all. In fact, Ram will see Bharat as a threat. And therefore, he will try to get rid of him. Now, as a mother, her concern for her child is natural. Now, I was telling this story in America in one class, and after that, different people brought different lessons. So there was one devotee couple, they had a young teenage son. So he was talking with me after the class. He said, so what did you learn from this class? He said, joint families are very troublesome. So, the mind can draw any lesson from anywhere. Now, if that is not the lesson over here, it is that you could say in that joint family only when Ram and Sita went out, Lakshman came. So it's not a multi-generational, but in that same family, the brothers stayed together. So it is rather than depending on our particular perspective, what happens? We zero in on a particular problem, and we think this is the whole cause of the problem. But it's not like that. When Yudhishthir agreed to gamble, he didn't want to. But what happened was Dhritarashtra asked him to come, and Dhritarashtra sent Vidura with the message. So it was for Yudhishthir. He felt that two of my elders, two of my father figures, they are asking me. How can I say no to them? So and that's why, although he didn't want to gamble, he reluctantly gambled. So similarly, one boy in Australia, he told me after this, obeying our elders is very dangerous. So now we can draw the wrong lessons from certain stories. But the point here is that it was Kaikai. So I asked this boy, why are you thinking like this? Because when somebody draws a particular lesson, there is a particular background for that. If somebody is saying obeying elders is dangerous, then maybe they are going through a rebellious phase. Maybe they feel that their elders are telling them to do something which they feel is not good. So I asked this boy in America, I says, why do you feel joint families are dangerous? So then he told me something which helped me see things in context. He said that, children are very perceptive. Sometimes parents try to hide things from the children, but it's not so easy. He says that, my mother and father, this is in America, he says, when they are here, they get along very well. But when they go to India, they go to their in-laws and they go to their in-laws and this person spoke this and that person spoke that and that person spoke that. And he says that actually they look forward to go to India, but after they go to India, they look forward, when will I leave India and come back? So I find that the conflicts are increased in my family. So then I told him, have you told this to your parents? He says, no, and they want to hide it from me. So they don't tell this openly, but I can figure it out. So I said, I didn't want to tell. I didn't tell this to them. So then I talked with his parents and he said, I said, actually, yes, we have our conflicts, but, we love our parents. We respect our in-laws. Yes, there are some issues, but they are not such big issues for us. We didn't realize that this was such a big issue for our son. So what happens is people pursue things in different ways. So here, rather than focusing, the point here in the Ramayana is about human nature. That it is not about joint families or multi-generational families or whatever. The point is how human nature is such that even a good person may end up sometimes doing something bad. So for Kaikai, it was entirely her concern for her son. And so when Kaikai did her actions, so what Kaikai's actions were terrible. But, it's very easy to judge the actions. And sometimes it's necessary to judge actions also. What you did was terrible. But if we want to have any kind of relationship with anyone, it's important to understand the emotions that led to those actions. So generally, if somebody does something hurtful to us, it's easy to think, this is a terrible person. This person wanted to hurt me. This person just doesn't care for me. Now, it's possible that there are cruel people in this world. who get some joy in causing pain to others. But if we look at her situation, now what were her emotions? Now basically there were three emotions which combined, or three influences we could say. This is like there is a small sound when we have a mic, a small sound becomes very big. So first there was manipulation. She was misled, misinformed. Hmm? That who did the misinforming? That is Mantara. Yes. And then there was her own insecurity. Insecurity that I may be sidelined in favor of Kaushalya. That I had the privileged position, but if my husband is no longer the king, then I am no longer the favorite queen of the king, then I'll just become another member of the royal family. And when Ram becomes the king, his mother will become the privileged woman. So there was that insecurity. And then there was concern. Concern for her son. So for Bharat. So none of these emotions are terrible emotions. Okay. So we all may get misled or manipulated. So there was fear was there. Because so that fear along with concern, what it led her to was something disastrous, something catastrophic. So Ram and Bharat, in their relationship, a third person, not complete outsider, is from within the family only. Now her actions created a huge rupture. Now when this happened, now how was this to be dealt with? So broadly, I said we'll take in 3 sessions on this topic. So in today's session, we'll be discussing about how to deal with the third person influence that comes in. Some third person either intentionally or unintentionally does something which creates a rupture in our relationship. Then we will talk about how when Bharat, that will be either we have a session tomorrow evening and day after tomorrow morning. So 2 sessions, yeah. So one session we'll be discussing about, I'll decide which session to take when, but when we are falsely accused, how do we deal with that? So who was falsely accused? Yeah, he was considered a part of the conspiracy. How how do we deal with that? And then lastly, we'll discuss about how the reconciliation happened. That will be when Ram and Bharat meet in the forest. What exactly happens over there? So now, in this case, however, at this particular point, what happened with Kaikeyi was that she ended up doing something terrible. So I said that when a good person does bad things, there are these three situations. It could be just one off, it could be a gradual degradation of the person, or it could be something concealed coming out. So if we see over here, for Kaikai, her insecurity was there, her concern was there. So generally, when people act, there are many emotions, and sometimes they themselves may not know why they are doing what they are doing. Or at least they may think I'm doing it because of this reason, but they may be doing it about some other reason. So for her concern for Bharat's protection became so strong that she started feeling that everyone is a part of the conspiracy to take the kingdom away from Bharat. So when this happens, that okay, so it's like when we end up becoming so convinced that my opinion is the right opinion. Then what happens is, sometimes we say what is the opposite of truth? Falsehood or lies. Hmm? That is true, but actually the greatest enemy of the truth is actually the belief that we have truth. Hmm? So if somebody is speaking a lie, okay, by some investigation you find out it is a lie. But if I think I already know, then what happens is, if anybody else provides me any evidence also, I think this is fabricated evidence. There's an American comedian who said that I have already made up my mind. Now don't confuse me with the facts. So, how did you make up your mind? So, that certainty of our opinion, that is often the greatest enemy of truth. That when we feel I know, then in one sense, knowing is a good thing, but believing that we are already knowing, that is the enemy of knowing, isn't it? So for Kaikai, somehow she bought into the idea that there is a conspiracy over here. And that was like one sure truth, that there is a threat to Bharat. And it was not, once her mind started working over time, it was not just that she felt that I have to give the kingdom to Bharat. It was also, if Bharat doesn't get the kingdom, he will be ruined. And therefore, once that became her belief, or unquestionable belief, then anybody who questioned that became a bad guy. So normally, she would not have done anything so terrible. The Ramayana describes that her behavior became totally opposite of her normal behavior. She was wise, kind, and gentle. But in the process, she became foolish. She became cruel, and she became harsh. So kind and gentle is, kind is in actions, gentle is in words. So cruel is in behavior, harsh is in speech. So she became foolish, cruel, and harsh. It's almost like a 180-degree change. Sometimes some people, when they want to impress others, they say, no, I'll give back 200% of my effort. Well, you can only give 100%. Nobody can give 200%. Like some people say, that, this was such a powerful talk. It brought a 360-degree change in my attitude. 360-degree means no change. You can. So it might seem very impressive. But if somebody says it's a 360-degree change, that means they're saying your talk was useless. So, for her, there was a total 180-degree change. Now, when this happened, why did this happen? It was, she was not a bad person, but her belief that Bharat is in danger and I have to protect him. And protect him at all costs. That led her to do one after another things that she would never have conceived. Her husband, it is described, Dashrath Maharaj begged her, please, if you want Bharat to be the king, let him be the king. But don't send Ram away. I will not be able to live without Ram. I will die without him. She just paid no attention. No, she just felt that Dashrath is trying to emotionally manipulate her. She paid no attention to it. Vashishta, Sumitra, all of them, they tried to implore her. But she just did not budge. Now, fortunately for her, saving grace. Sometimes, you know, promoting the other person's interests is simply a way of promoting our own interests. That is, if you become powerful, then through your power, I will gain power. So, my interest is not really in you, my interest is in myself through you. But sometimes we really have concern for the other person. So for her, although her love for Bharat made her do terrible things, her insecurity of her own position was not as great as her concern for Bharat. So although both of these emotions were there, the insecurity was much lesser. And that's why eventually what happened is that when Bharat came back, that's when her illusion burst. So we will talk about this incident a little in the next session, but I'll explain the principle over here, and then we'll go into the specifics of the incident in tomorrow's session. So see, normally if we are here, now sometimes you may have seen this drama, Samat was telling about me and my mind. So the mind is inside us, but we can say that if I am here and my mind is here, suppose outside. So what happens is when we are looking at anyone else, we look at them through our mind, isn't it? So if somebody is very nice to me, and immediately my mind says, what does this person want? Why are they being so nice to me? Isn't it? So if my mind, if I have had experience, if my mind is suspicious, maybe because I had experiences previously of people being nice initially only to demand and extort and manipulate, then what happens is that thought normally pops up. So we look at people through our mind. So for all of us, this is the normal way we function. And yes, our mind is the tool through which we process the world. However, we need at least some people in our life who are close enough that we can look at our mind through them and not look at them through our mind. So what does this mean? That if I have an if I have a particular opinion, and if somebody criticizes my opinion, then if I am very arrogant or insecure, or if I don't have a good relationship with that person, I'll say, you are simply envious of me. You are afraid that you will be proven wrong and I'll be proven right. Everybody will support me. That's why you're opposing me. So we normally look at everyone through our mind. But if we have even one person in our life, now how does a person come over here that we look at them through our mind? That is when there is trust. When we trust them that this person is my well-wisher, that this person does not have any ulterior agenda over here. So then, okay, if this person is saying like this, maybe I need to re-evaluate what my mind is saying. It's not necessary that this person will always be right, but at least I need to be open to the possibility that maybe there is something right in this person's statement. So for Kaikai, Bharat was that one person. So she genuinely loved Bharat. And that love was not a paternalistic kind of love where, I love you and I know what is good for you and you just listen to me. No, that it was more of when Bharat came back. And Bharat just couldn't believe what had happened. what have you done? When Bharat understood what had happened, he said, you cannot be my mother. You must be the goddess of destruction, incarnated in our dynasty to destroy our entire dynasty. When she heard this, what is he saying? She just couldn't process it. She couldn't figure it out. So what had happened was, in her mind, Kaikai, in her mind, she had created an imaginary Bharat. And she was thinking, I am doing all this for him. And nobody understands what I am doing. But he will understand. He will understand and appreciate how far I went to protect his interests. I went against the entire world for his sake. So she thought that this Bharat will appreciate her efforts. But when the real Bharat came, and this real Bharat, he condemned her. So then there was an internal collision between the imaginary Bharat and the real Bharat. So that was the time. Let's keep it here. Keep it close. So that was the time when that imaginary Bharat just dissipated and disappeared. And then she realized the horror of what she had done. And she repented terribly. And the proof of her, the evidence of her repentance was that she eventually went with Bharat to beg Ram to come back. So that way, what happened for her, what she did was terrible, but it was a one-off incident. And fortunately, while it did cause damage, but it did not cause a breakage in the family. There's a damage. What happened was, what she did was a terrible thing, but it was good intentions which had been terribly misled. So, see, when does damage can happen in any relationship? But from that damage, when breakage in the relationship happens, that is when we feel this person is never going to change. This person, this is the way they are going to be forever, and the way they are is terrible, is unbearable. That's when the damage leads to breakage. So this did not happen in the case of Vashilya, because in the case of Kaikai, because her intentions were good. Intentions were good, although they were terribly, even monstrously misdirected. When she realized how my intentions have been misdirected, what wrong I have done, she corrected herself. And that's how nobody held it against her forever after that. What was done was terrible, but it is a closed chapter. And we'll see how Ram also helped Bharat to come to some level of closure in the future sessions. But here the theme is that we're talking about brothers, but we're talking here primarily in terms of how in this relationship something disruptive happened and how that was healed. So I'll summarize what we discussed and then we'll have a few questions. So we're talking about relationships, and we talk about relationships when there is a threat in the relationships, conflict in the relationship. It could be internal factors or external factors. Internal factors are basically the people have different natures or different priorities. These internal differences we will discuss when we talk about Kumbhakarna and Vibhishan and Ravan. So external differences can be two. What are they? Situations can come up, sometimes they're terrible, and people can get involved. So natures is the three brothers. Situations is the two brothers. People is the four brothers. So Vali and Sugriv, that is the situation that arose. So then it is discussed about in the case of the relationship between Ram and Bharat and how Kaikai intervened and Kaikai went wrong. So we discussed here Kaikai's actions in trying to understand them. So I discussed about how normally good people do good things and bad people do bad things. So the challenge is when good people do bad things. So how do we figure that out? So depending on the kind of relationship we have, we will go towards either the most charitable explanation, oh, that this was just one-off thing. If we like that person, we trust that person, we say it was a one-off thing. Don't make a big deal out of it. But we already dislike that person, we already suspect that person, then we will say, oh, this was concealed all along. And it could also be that there is a gradual degradation, there's a gradual corruption happening in the person. So now when we have to figure it out, so we discussed about in Kaikai's case, Kaikai's actions, they were good person doing a bad thing, but what was behind it? It was good intentions gone wrong. The intentions were never bad. So there was the manipulation, and that manipulation created insecurity within her. It also created, it calls it concern, almost like a paranoid concern for Bharat's well-being. And the concern was much greater than the insecurity. Now, what happened here is that for her, the problem was her certainty that she knew what was going on. That became the enemy of knowing for her. So she was just not ready to listen to anyone, because for her this certainty was there in her mind, the certainty that there is a conspiracy over here, and anybody who tells me to do something which different from what I am doing, that person is a co-conspirator. If anybody is telling, no, don't do this, if Dashrath is saying, just at least let Ram stay, no, that is also proof that he is completely controlled by Kaushalya. So for her, what saved her was that she had Bharat, through whom she could look at her certainty. So that relationship, her love for her son was genuine, and that eventually saved her. So for all of us, we may face difficult situations in our life. We may have people who may try to manipulate us. But if we have some people whom we trust, we have trustworthy well-wishers, and through them we can look at our mind rather than looking at them through our mind. Then we will be able to protect ourselves from being misled. And for Kaikai, she was terribly misled. She did a terrible thing, but it was a one-off thing which happened because of the situations and how she took the situations. And because it was a one-off thing which was good intentioned thing done wrong, so there was no repeated, was closed. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, ma'am. You have a mic or you want to speak now? Yes. Yes. Anyway, you can speak a little then. Okay.
you, Prabhuji, first of all, for the amazing class and the introspection. My question was that possibly in today's times, we cannot really box ourselves or anybody as being completely good or bad. And there are varying degrees of goodness and badness within maybe all, many of us.
Yeah.
So when we try to perceive or understand, and we are mostly, I think, many times driven by a lot of concern, insecurity, manipulation within ourselves. I mean, so when we sit and try to introspect, how do we make sense of it? Because things are not always as black and white as it was possibly in the earlier times of Treta Yuga.
Yeah.
So, Prabhuji, how do we use this in our own context to understand how do we
Good
move?
question. Yeah. See, whether it was that black and white, even the past is also open to question. Because here also we see that Kaikeyi did something bad, Vali did something bad. Karna was virtuous, charitable only, but he also did some terrible things. So I think it is a part of human nature itself that our nature tends to be mixed. See, one way to understand the nature is a person a good person or a bad person? There are one way is two ways basically. The bonds and the boundaries. Bonds means that what are they bonded to? What are they dedicated to? Hmm? So, say if somebody is a patriotic person, if somebody loves their country, and through the way they talk, through the way they conduct themselves, then we can reasonably say, okay, this person is not likely to be corrupt. Hmm? They love their country. So, if somebody is very responsible in terms of taking care of their family, then we can say they are not likely to cheat their family itself. So, if somebody is a devotee, they say if this person is devoted to God, probably this will be a good person. So, now, broadly, one way to understand a person is by looking at their bonds. So, bonds is what are they living for? What is it that is driving them? We all have many desires in our life, but our bonds are like our defining desires. This is what we live for. We may all want, oh, I want a bigger house, I want this, I want that, I want that. But what is it that defines us? So now bonds are important, but the other factor that determines a person's character is their boundaries. You know, what do we seek? What do we seek? That is one important thing. But the other is how do we seek it? A person's character is also defined by the boundaries within which they function. So now we all want our children to do well in exams. And say our child does moderately well but not very well. And one day a child comes, Mommy, Daddy, I came first in my class. I wanted to please you so much. Finally, I have pleased you. Oh, wonderful. How did you do that? He says, I learned how to hack a computer. So I hacked into my teacher's computer and I got the paper beforehand. And that's how I came first. Now, okay. How could you do that? Nobody wanted me to come first. I wanted to please you. But the point is that I wanted you to come first by studying and learning and becoming disciplined, not by hacking the computer. Is it? So, what we want to do is important, but how do we go about doing it? That is also important. So, if we focus only on the bonds of a person and not the boundaries, then that can be problematic. Like even in devotee community, sometimes say all devotees are wonderful people. Well, that's a wonderful hope. Yes, the fact that somebody is practicing bhakti, that is wonderful. But everybody has their conditionings. And everybody is dealing with the conditioning. So we have to be real. We don't have to be suspicious of everyone. But we don't have to be naive with everyone also. So based on they may be trying to be bond with Krishna, but their boundaries may be very different, isn't it? As now, no, I was in America and there was one devotee from a very they had gone to America and settled, and they were introduced to Krishna consciousness in India, and they went to America and there was a temple over there, and there was an American devotee over there. So he was the leader over there, and then they were going and serving in this temple, and then that temple president got angry over something, and he spoke some very terrible foul words, and they said, these are the kind of words that like thugs and hooligans speak. I said, how can a person who is supposed to be a temple president speak even such words? They're completely shocked. And I know that temple president also, I know this Jodi also, so I talked with him. And he said immediately, he called that couple and he says, I'm sorry. And then he said, I absolutely had no meaning, no intention to disturb you anyway. But he had actually been born and brought up in a very rough neighborhood. He had the kind of childhood he had was terrible. That he was living in a very crime infested area. He said that the only way I could survive was making sure that my knife was every day with me 24 hours a day. So he says, from that level, my just speaking foul words in anger, it's actually a big level of purification for me. So, but the thing is, the boundaries are different. So, if we are from a particular background, we may expect a certain level of boundaries to be there in a person. Just because they don't have the boundaries doesn't make them a bad person. But from our perspective, it may not seem that way. So we need to look at the bonds and the boundaries. So we will all get angry. We will all have our hard, weaker moments. But even in our weakest moments, there are certain things which we will never do. So, what are those boundaries? So, that is also something which very strongly defines a person. So, we may have a very simplistic idea of a good person means that they will never do bad things. But a good person may also do bad things, but even that bad things will be within certain boundaries. I may do this, I'm not going to do that. So, in office, for example, there is always some office politics and there is backbiting and there is politicking and all those things are there. But even while doing all that, even normal society, the people have boundaries. I may speak something, do some backbiting about you as a colleague, but I'm not going to spread some new rumors about your family, about your wife, or about your daughter, or about that is crossing a boundary. So everybody has certain sense of boundaries. So I'd say looking at what the bonds of a person are and looking at what the boundaries of the person are. Based on that, we can broadly understand who is where on the spectrum of goodness and.
Any other question?
Thank you.
Yes.
For a wonderful lecture. So I was just wondering, I think this is Treta Yuga we are talking about. So Lord Ram, we know, is a supreme personality Godhead. And we also know out of 4 dharma, there are 3 dharmas prevail. I'm not sure which dharma is actually not there during Treta Yuga. But given that, it is like, all 3 pillars of dharma is there, how come come up to this level of, actually, Antara, where put in the situation where actually there are dharmas are already prevailing in the Treta Yuga. And what actually made them to act, behave in a way that it led to this situation. That's number 1. Number 2, Lord Ram, being Supreme Personality Godhead, was not his influence as Supreme Personality Godhead, did not influence his own family because they are all blood relatives actually. How did it actually go to that extent that they actually become, kind of, opposite, became acted as an opposite part, like an enemy to the Lord? I mean, I'm
Good
sorry.
questions. Yeah, good questions. So regarding the first question of in Treta Yuga, how could they do something so terrible? Well, first thing is when the Lord descends, that is the time of dharmasya glanihi. So it is not, so the situations that are described when the Lord comes, there in scripture, there are broadly two sections, or not many, but broadly two. There is something which is descriptive, and there is something that is prescriptive. Descriptive means this is how things were done at that time. Prescriptive is this is how things should be done. So everything in scripture is not a prescription. Say for example, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita it is described that when Haridas Thakur and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were there, Haridas Thakur was not allowed in the Jagannath temple. Now, is that something which is what the Vaishnava Acharyas or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted? Is that something which is to be permanently implemented? No, that is not a prescription. That's a description. That's how the culture was at that time. So, when the Lord descends, so much of what is told at that time is descriptive. And much of it may still be pure, but much of it may not be pure. The Lord comes when there is an emergency. Apad dharma, as they say. So emergency means it's a very serious crisis situation. So while if you see in the Ramayana, overall still there is a lot of it. So Ravan still existed, although it was such a sacred age, and Ravan was doing horrendous things at that time. So there could always be, that means, if this is a overall golden age, or you can say good age, but within that there can be extreme bad patches, and in fact it is in these bad patches that there is avatar. So because things are so bad, that's why the Lord comes, isn't it? So that's why, so these things can happen at any time, because even if it's a sacred age, there are always people who can be miscreants, people who can be misled. So there is always the free will that is there. And the free will generally not be misused. Like say I said, anybody who comes for a class here is unlikely to be going out slapping other people. But is there a possibility? Maybe somebody gets their relative to come, and their relative is mentally little disturbed, and that person, something happens to them and they start becoming aggressive. It's a remote possibility, but it's a possibility. So this is Dharmasya Glani. That's the first answer. Now, the second question about Lord Ram being there and not being able to uh, prevent the negative influences or the corrupting influences happening on his own family. Well, every scripture has a purpose. So the Ramayana, at least the Ramayana that is written by Valmiki, there are subsequent retellings and they have slightly different moods. But the purpose of the Valmiki Ramayana, it is to demonstrate the behavior of ideal person. It is not to establish Ram's divinity. That is there, but that is not the purpose of the Ramayana. See, the point is that life is difficult for everyone. And how do we deal with difficult situations? When you say the characteristics of an ideal person, what does it mean? Now, everybody can be ideal in ideal situations. It's only when situations become non-ideal, so situations become terrible, that's when our character is really tested. So, if Lord Ram had, that's why whenever I speak the Ramayana, I don't use the word Lord Ram, because the mood of the stories of the Ramayana, if you have to draw some moral lessons from it, now, emphasizing that Ram is God doesn't really look at the stories from the perspective of drawing some lessons. He's God, he's in control of everything. Everything is his Leela then ultimately. That is one level of looking at things. But that is not the only level. So the Lord does not always demonstrate his omnipotence. So because if he is God, then for him there is no difficulty. He is God. There is no difficulty. And what is there to learn for us from his behavior? See, we can learn from someone only when they are in situations similar to ours, isn't it? If there's a small kid being bullied by somebody, you tell, there is that boy. He was also bullied. But he bet up the bully. How? Because he was bigger than the bully. Okay, and what is there for me to learn? I am not bigger than the bully. So, if the Ramayana emphasizes that Ram is God, then there is nothing for anyone to learn from him. He's God, he deals with all problems. But Lord Ram, through most of the Ramayana, acts like a normal human being. And how he faces difficulties. When he is exiled for no fault of his, he does not become bitter. He does not become vengeful. Sometimes, when one person is treated badly, okay, I will go, but before going, I'll poison everyone's minds over here, so that nobody will have peace over here. Ram does not do that. In fact, he tries to pacify everyone before he goes. So that shows his ideal character. So it is not that Ram does not have the capacity to influence others. Everybody has free will, and he respects the free will of everyone. And in this particular situation, his purpose is to demonstrate that even when bad things happen to us, how do we respond gracefully to those bad things? If he exhibits his omnipotence and doesn't let any bad thing happen only, then he can't. Then there's nothing for us to learn from his actions. Okay? Thank you. So, thank you very much. श्री रामचंद्र भगवान की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय, गौर भक्त वृंद की जय, निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे।
चैतन्य चरण प्रभु की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय।